The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in April 1882, and Flora Edwards held it in her trembling hands like it was the answer to every prayer she had whispered into the California night. She stood on the porch of her modest ranch house outside Yuba City, the Sacramento Valley stretching before her in golden waves of wheat and wildflowers, and read the carefully scripted words from a man who promised to be her husband, her partner, her salvation from the loneliness that had become her constant companion since her father passed 2 years prior. Flora was 23 years old, with chestnut hair that fell in soft waves past her shoulders and green eyes that held both determination and a deep weariness from working the land alone. The ranch was small, only 40 acres, but it was hers, left to her by her father who had believed a woman could do anything a man could if given the chance. She had proven him right, rising before dawn every morning to tend the chickens, milk the cow, repair fences, and manage the small vegetable garden that provided most of her food. But the work was crushing in its relentlessness, and the isolation ate at her spirit like rust on iron. The man in the letter called himself Edmund Fairweather. He wrote of his experience as a ranch hand in Nevada, his desire to settle down with a good woman, his skills with horses and cattle. He included a photograph that showed a handsome man with dark hair and kind eyes. Flora had written back immediately, and over the next 3 months, their correspondence had grown warmer, more personal. He spoke of building a life together, of children and prosperity. She found herself imagining a future that did not feel so crushingly alone. When Edmund finally proposed marriage through the mail, Flora accepted without hesitation. The arrangement required a payment, he explained, to cover his travel expenses from Nevada and to help him settle his affairs before the move. The amount was substantial, nearly all the money Flora had saved from selling her vegetable surplus and eggs in town. $500 in gold coins, carefully hoarded over 2 years of backbreaking work. But Edmund promised it was an investment in their future, and Flora, desperate for companionship and help with the ranch, sent the money to the address he provided in Carson City. She waited 3 weeks, checking the road every morning with her heart beating fast against her ribs. She cleaned the house until it gleamed, sewed new curtains for the bedroom, and even bought fabric for a simple wedding dress. The neighbors, sparse as they were in this part of the valley, had heard about her impending marriage, and a few of the women promised to help with a celebration. But Edmund Fairweather never arrived. On the 22nd day after she had sent the money, Flora received a brief note from the postmaster in Carson City. No one by the name of Edmund Fairweather had ever collected mail at that address. It was a boarding house, and the landlady reported that a man matching the description in the photograph had stayed there for 2 weeks before disappearing. He had used the name Edmund, but his last name was different each time he introduced himself. Flora stood in her kitchen, the letter falling from her numb fingers, and felt something break inside her chest. Not just her heart, though that was shattered thoroughly enough, but her faith in human goodness, her hope for the future, her belief that the world held any kindness for a woman alone. She did not cry. The tears felt too small for the enormity of what had been stolen from her. Instead, she walked through her days like a ghost, performing the necessary tasks to keep herself and the animals alive, but the light had gone out of her eyes. She told no one what had happened, too ashamed to admit that she had been such a fool, that she had given away everything she had worked for to a man who existed only in false promises and lies. 3 weeks after the terrible truth settled over her like a burial shroud, Zane Dalton rode into her yard. Flora was in the chicken coop, collecting eggs with mechanical efficiency, when she heard the horse. She emerged into the bright June sunshine, shading her eyes against the glare, and saw a tall man dismounting from a dusty buckskin gelding. He was perhaps 26 or 27, lean and weather-beaten in the way of men who spent their lives outdoors. His hair was dark blonde, almost brown from the sun, and his eyes were a startling blue even from a distance. He wore the practical clothes of a working cowboy, dusty boots, worn denim trousers, a faded blue shirt, and a hat that had seen better days. "Miss Edwards." His voice was deep and careful, like he was trying not to startle a nervous colt. Flora set the egg basket on the ground, her hand instinctively moving to the pocket of her apron where she kept a small knife. "I am. What do you want?" The man reached slowly into his vest pocket and pulled out a leather pouch. It made a heavy clinking sound. "My name is Zane Dalton. I have been tracking a man named Edmund Fairweather, though that is not his real name. I believe he stole money from you through false promises of marriage." Flora felt the blood drain from her face. "How do you know about that?" Zane's expression was grim. "Because you are not the first woman he has done this to. I have been following his trail for 4 months now, since he stole $300 from my sister in Colorado. She was 20 years old, working as a schoolteacher, and she saved every penny to bring him to her. When he never showed up, she was so ashamed she could not even tell our parents. She only told me because I noticed she had stopped eating, stopped living really. It took me weeks to get the full story from her." He stepped closer, and Flora could see the quiet fury that lived behind his calm exterior. "I promised her I would find him and make him pay for what he did. I have been tracking him ever since, from Colorado to Wyoming to Nevada. I found 3 other women he had swindled. 2 of them gave me their stories willingly once they understood I was trying to stop him. The 3rd had already left town, too broken to stay where everyone knew what happened to her." Flora wrapped her arms around herself, the shame she had been trying to suppress rising like bile in her throat. "And what does that have to do with me?" Zane held out the leather pouch. "I caught up with him 5 days ago in Sacramento. He was preparing to do the same thing to another woman there, had already started the correspondence. I found him in a saloon, spending money he stole from good women on whiskey and card games. We had words, then we had more than words." Flora could see the yellowing bruise on Zane's jaw, the split on his knuckles that was still healing. "You fought him." "I did more than fight him. I made him understand that there are consequences for destroying people's lives. Then I took back every penny he had left. He had spent some of it, the money he took from the other women, but he still had most of what he took from you, $500 in gold coins. He had been saving it for something, keeping it separate from his gambling money." Zane extended the pouch further. "This belongs to you." Flora stared at the pouch like it was a snake. "I do not understand. Why would you bring it to me? You could have kept it for your sister, replaced what she lost. Because it is yours. My sister would never forgive me if I stole from another victim to repay her. That would make me no better than him." Zane took another step forward and gently placed the pouch in her hands. The weight of it was solid, real, exactly the weight she remembered. "Edmund Fairweather, whose real name is actually Edmund Crenshaw, will not be swindling any more women. The sheriff in Sacramento has him in custody for fraud and theft. I gave statements from all the women I could find. He will be going to prison for a long time." Flora's fingers closed around the leather pouch, and suddenly the tears she had been holding back for weeks broke free. She stood there in her dusty yard, holding her salvation in her hands, and wept like a child. She was dimly aware of Zane stepping back, giving her space, his own discomfort with her tears evident in the way he shifted his weight from foot to foot. When she finally regained control of herself, wiping her face with her apron, she looked up at him. I am sorry. I did not mean to fall apart like that. You have nothing to apologize for. What he did to you, to all of you, it was cruel and calculated. You have every right to your feelings. Zane gestured toward the house. Might I trouble you for some water? I have been riding since dawn to get here. Flora nodded, still clutching the pouch. Of course. Please, come inside. It is the least I can offer after what you have done for me. The interior of the house was simple but clean, furnished with pieces that had clearly seen years of use, but were well maintained. Flora gestured for Zane to sit at the small kitchen table while she pumped water into a cup and brought it to him. He drank deeply, and she noticed the way his shoulders relaxed slightly, the tension easing from his frame. "How did you find me?" she asked, sitting across from him. "Edmund kept letters from all of you. I think he enjoyed rereading them, seeing the hope he was about to destroy. When I searched his belongings after the fight, I found correspondence from 7 different women. Some he had already robbed, some he was still cultivating. Your letters were among them." Zane's jaw tightened. "Reading what you wrote to him, the trust you placed in his words, it made me even more determined to see this through." Flora felt heat rise in her cheeks. Those letters were private. They were foolish. They were honest. There is no shame in that. The shame belongs entirely to him. Zane finished the water and set the cup down carefully. "I wanted to make sure you got your money back, but I also wanted you to know that you were not alone in this, that what happened was not your fault." Something in Flora's chest loosened at those words. She had been carrying the weight of blame, believing that her desperation and loneliness had made her an easy mark, that she should have known better. To hear someone say otherwise, someone who had no reason to offer her comfort, was a gift she had not expected. "Your sister," Flora said quietly. "How is she doing now?" Zane's expression softened. "Better. Before I left to track Edmund down, I made sure she understood that this was not her failure. My mother and we talked with her, made sure she knew she was not alone. She is teaching again, and she has started courting a young man from the church, someone decent who knew nothing about what happened. I write to her every week, let her know where I am and what progress I have made. The last letter I sent told her about Sacramento, about catching him. I think it will help her heal, knowing he cannot do this to anyone else." Flora looked at this man who had spent 4 months of his life tracking down a criminal, not for personal gain but to protect his sister and help strangers. "You are a good brother. She is lucky to have you. Family looks after family. That is how I was raised." Zane glanced toward the window, where the afternoon sun was beginning to slant lower. "I should be going. I have a long ride back to Sacramento, and then I need to head home to Colorado. My parents have been managing our ranch while I have been gone, but they need my help." Flora stood, feeling a strange reluctance to see him leave. "Wait. You have ridden all this way just to bring me this money. The least I can do is offer you a meal and a place to rest for the night. You said you have been riding since dawn. Your horse needs rest even if you do not." Zane hesitated, and Flora could see the exhaustion in the lines around his eyes, the weariness that went bone deep. "I do not want to impose. It is not an imposition. It is gratitude." Flora's voice was firm. "Please, stay for dinner at least. Let me thank you properly." After a moment, Zane nodded. "All right, thank you. That is kind of you." Flora set about preparing a meal with an energy she had not felt in weeks. She had a chicken she had been planning to cook, and she made it with potatoes and carrots from her garden, biscuits from scratch, and even a berry pie she had made the day before but had no appetite to eat. As she worked, Zane took care of his horse, brushing the animal down and settling him in her small barn with food and water. When he came back inside, his sleeves were rolled up and there was a bit of hay in his hair. They ate together as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The conversation flowed more easily than Flora expected. Zane told her about his family's ranch in Colorado, about growing up with two sisters and learning to work cattle from his father. He spoke of the mountains and the different rhythm of life there compared to the California valley. Flora found herself talking about her own childhood, about her father who had believed in her capabilities, about learning to run the ranch after his death. "It must be hard," Zane said, "managing all this alone." "It is," Flora admitted, "but it is mine. My father wanted me to have this independence, to not have to rely on any man for my survival. I suppose that is why I was such easy prey for Edmund. I wanted partnership, not rescue. He promised me that, someone to share the work and the life with, not someone to take it from me." Zane nodded slowly. "That is not foolish. That is wise. You deserved better than what he gave you." As darkness fell, Flora insisted that Zane take her bed while she would sleep on the settee in the front room. He argued, but she was immovable, and finally he relented. She lay awake for a long time that night, listening to the familiar sounds of the house, but feeling less alone than she had in months. There was a man sleeping in her house, a good man who had asked nothing from her and had given her back not just her money but a piece of her faith in humanity. The next morning, Flora woke before dawn as usual and started making breakfast. Zane emerged from the bedroom looking better rested, though still with the lean, alert look of a man accustomed to watching his surroundings. They ate together, and then he began preparing his horse for the journey. Flora watched him work, noting the efficient, gentle way he handled the animal, the quiet competence in every movement. As he swung into the saddle, she stepped forward impulsively. "Zane, wait. I know you need to get home to Colorado, but if you are ever back this way, you would be welcome here. I mean that. You have given me more than money. You have given me back something I thought was lost forever." Zane looked down at her, and something in his expression shifted, became less guarded. "Thank you, Flora. That means more than you know. I will remember that." He rode away, and Flora stood watching until he disappeared down the road. Then she turned back to her ranch, the leather pouch of gold coins secure in her pocket, and set about her work with renewed purpose. The world had knocked her down, but it had also sent her someone who helped her stand back up. 3 weeks passed. Flora threw herself into the work of the ranch with the determination of someone reclaiming her life. She used some of the returned money to hire a man from town to help repair the barn roof and reinforce the fence line. She bought new laying hens and a young heifer that would provide milk and eventually calves. The ranch began to feel less like a burden and more like the dream her father had envisioned. But in the quiet moments, usually in the evening when the work was done, and she sat on her porch watching the sunset, Flora found her thoughts drifting to Zane Dalton. She thought about his quiet strength, the way he had traveled so far to right a wrong he had no obligation to fix. She thought about the conversations they had shared over dinner, the easy way he listened, really listened, when she spoke. She told herself it was foolish to read anything into one evening of kindness, that he was probably already back in Colorado, back to his life and his family and whatever future waited for him there. So when she looked up from weeding her garden on a warm July morning and saw a familiar buckskin horse coming up her road, she thought at first that her eyes were playing tricks on her. But as the rider drew closer, there was no mistaking Zane's tall frame, the way he sat his horse like he was part of the animal. Flora stood, brushing dirt from her skirt, her heart doing strange things in her chest. Zane dismounted, and she could see something different in his face, a nervousness that had not been there before. "Hello, Flora, Zane. I did not expect to see you again. Is everything all right? Did something happen with Edmund's case?" "No, nothing like that. He is still in custody, will be for years. My sister received her closure, and so did the other women I was able to contact. Zane removed his hat, turning it in his hands. I went back to Colorado like I planned, helped my parents with the ranch, got everything back in order. My mother was glad to have me home, and my father needed the extra hands for the summer work. But, Flora prompted, sensing there was more, but I could not stop thinking about you. The words came out in a rush, like he had been holding them back and they would not be contained any longer. I told myself it was just concern, that I wanted to make sure you were doing all right after everything that happened. But the truth is, Flora, in the one evening I spent here, I felt something I have not felt before. You are strong and capable and honest in a way that is rare. You did not pretend to be anything other than what you are. You spoke about your ranch and your life with such passion, such determination. I found myself wishing I could be part of that. Flora's breath caught. Zane, I do not understand what you are saying. He stepped closer, his blue eyes intense. I am saying that I rode for 2 weeks to get back here because I could not stand the thought of never seeing you again. I am saying that if you would be willing to give me a chance, I would like to court you properly. Not through letters, not with promises I cannot keep, but face to face, with honesty and time to really know each other. I know it is a lot to ask after what you have been through, and I will understand if you send me away. But I had to try. I had to know if what I felt that night was real. Flora felt tears prick her eyes, but this time they were not born of sadness. You rode 2 weeks to come back here. I did. I told my parents I needed to see this through, that there was someone here I could not forget. My father understood. He said when you find something worth having, distance does not matter. Zane's voice dropped lower. I think you are worth any distance, Flora Edwards. She took a step toward him, closing the space between them. I thought about you too, more than I wanted to admit. I told myself I was being foolish, that I was confusing gratitude with something else. But when I saw you riding up just now, my heart knew before my head did. I would like very much for you to court me, Zane Dalton, but I need you to understand something first. What is that? This ranch is mine. I will not give it up, not for anyone. My independence, the life my father built for me, it matters. If you are looking for a woman who will leave everything behind to follow you to Colorado, I am not her. Zane smiled, a real smile that transformed his serious face. I am not asking you to leave. I am asking if there might be room here for one more. My parents have my 2 brothers-in-law helping now, men who married my sisters. They do not need me the way they once did. But you have 40 acres and big dreams and no help to see them through. I am good with horses and cattle. I know how to work land. If you would have me, I could help you build something here, together. Flora felt something warm bloom in her chest, something that felt like hope but stronger, more solid. You would leave Colorado, leave your family. My family will always be there. I can visit, and they can visit here. But Flora, I have been working my family's ranch all my life. The idea of working my own land, of building something from the ground up with someone I care about, that is the dream I did not know I had until I met you. He reached out tentatively and took her hand. His palm was calloused and warm. I am not asking you to marry me tomorrow. I am asking for time to prove myself to you, to show you that not every man is like Edmund, that some of us mean what we say. Flora squeezed his hand. Then stay. Court me properly. Let us see what we can build together. The courting period that followed was unlike anything Flora had imagined when she first wrote to Edmund. Zane took a room at the boarding house in Yuba City, but he came to the ranch every day at dawn and worked alongside her until sunset. He was true to his word, capable with animals and repairs, strong when heavy lifting was needed but never condescending about her own abilities. They worked as a team, falling into an easy rhythm that felt natural and right. In the evenings, after the work was done, they would sit on the porch and talk. Sometimes they discussed practical matters, plans for expanding the vegetable garden or breeding the heifer. Other times the conversations ranged wider, touching on books they had read, places they hoped to see someday, childhood memories that shaped who they had become. Zane told her about tracking Edmund, about the anger he had felt on behalf of his sister and the other women, about the satisfaction of finally bringing the man to justice. Flora found herself opening up about her grief over her father's death, about the loneliness that had driven her to seek a mail-order husband in the first place. "I felt like I was disappearing," she admitted one evening as they watched stars emerge in the darkening sky. "Like if I did not have someone to talk to share my life with, I would just fade away into the work and the silence." Zane reached over and took her hand, a gesture that had become comfortable between them. "You could never disappear. You are too bright, too alive, but I understand loneliness. It is its own kind of hunger." As summer deepened into August, their relationship deepened as well. The first time Zane kissed her, they were in the barn, and Flora had just finished milking the cow. She stood, brushing straw from her skirt, and found him watching her with an expression that made her breath catch. He crossed the space between them slowly, giving her time to step away if she wanted, but she did not want to step away. When his lips met hers, gentle and questioning, she felt something click into place inside her, like a key turning in a lock. "I am falling in love with you," he whispered against her hair afterward. "I think I started that first day, but I know it now for certain." Flora pulled back just enough to look into his eyes. "I am falling in love with you too. It terrifies me. After Edmund, after believing in someone who was a lie, I am afraid to trust my own feelings. Then trust my actions. Judge me by what I do, not what I say. I will prove to you every day that this is real." Zane cupped her face in his hands. "I am not going anywhere, Flora, not unless you send me away." By September, it was clear to both of them that what they had was permanent, enduring. Zane proposed properly one evening in late September, as they stood in the field watching the harvest moon rise enormous and orange over the valley. He had no ring yet, promised to take her to Sacramento to choose one together, but he asked the question with his whole heart in his voice. "Flora Edwards, will you marry me? Will you let me be your husband, your partner in this life you are building? I promise to honor your independence, to work beside you, not above you, to be the man you deserve." Flora did not hesitate. "Yes, yes, I will marry you, Zane Dalton." They were married in October, in a simple ceremony at the small church in Yuba City. Zane's family could not make the journey from Colorado on short notice, but Flora's scattered neighbors came, and the women who had promised her a celebration months ago for a wedding that never happened threw themselves into creating a joyful day. The local rancher who had known Flora's father walked her down the aisle, and Flora wore the dress she had sewn for Edmund. But she had altered it, changed it enough that it felt new, felt right. When Zane said his vows, his voice was steady and sure, and Flora knew with bone-deep certainty that this man would keep every promise he made. When she said hers, she meant every word, offering not just her hand but her heart, her trust, everything she had been afraid to give again. Their wedding night was spent in the ranch house, and Zane carried her over the threshold with a grin that made her laugh. They came together with tenderness and passion, learning each other in the most intimate way, and Flora marveled that something that had felt impossible just a few months ago was now her reality. She had a partner, a true partner, someone who saw her as an equal and loved her for exactly who she was. The first year of their marriage was hard work, but deeply satisfying. Zane's presence transformed the ranch. Together they were able to accomplish what Flora had been struggling to do alone. They expanded the herd, buying more cattle with the money Flora had gotten back. They planted a larger crop of wheat, gambling that the valley's fertile soil would yield a good harvest. Zane's knowledge of horses led him to start breeding the buckskin gelding with a mare they purchased, beginning what would eventually become a profitable side business. In the spring of 1883, Flora discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with joy and fear in equal measure. Zane was ecstatic, immediately becoming protective in ways that Flora found both endearing and exasperating. He tried to keep her from heavy work, but she insisted on maintaining her role in running the ranch, compromising only in the final months when her growing belly made certain tasks impractical. Their son was born in December, a healthy baby boy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's determined chin. They named him Thomas, after Flora's father, and Zane wrote to his family in Colorado with the news. A letter came back full of congratulations and plans to visit in the spring. The visit from Zane's family in April of 1884 was a revelation for Flora. She had worried about meeting his parents and sisters, concerned that they might resent her for taking Zane away from Colorado. Instead, she found warm, welcoming people who clearly loved their son and brother and were grateful that he had found happiness. Zane's mother, Martha, was particularly kind, helping with baby Thomas and sharing stories about Zane's childhood that made Flora laugh until her sides hurt. Zane's sister Sarah, the one Edmund had stolen from, pulled Flora aside one afternoon while the men were out checking the cattle. "I wanted to thank you," she said quietly, "for giving my brother a reason to keep going after he caught that monster. Zane wrote to me about you from Sacramento before he even came here the first time. He said he had met the bravest woman he had ever known, someone who had been knocked down but was determined to get back up. I could tell even then that you were special to him." Flora felt tears sting her eyes. "He saved me, not just by bringing back the money, but by showing me that not everyone is cruel, that there are still good people in the world." Sarah squeezed her hand. "You saved each other. That is what love is supposed to do." The years that followed were filled with growth and prosperity. The ranch expanded, the cattle business thrived, and Zane's horse breeding operation developed a reputation for quality animals. They hired seasonal help when needed, but kept the operation small enough to manage themselves. Flora loved the rhythm of their life together, the way they moved as a team through the work and the days. In 1885, Flora gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Rose. She had her mother's green eyes and her father's easy smile. Thomas, now a toddler, was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to help with everything. The house rang with the sounds of children, and Flora sometimes paused in her work to marvel at how different her life had turned out from what she had imagined when she first wrote to Edmund Fairweather. One evening in the summer of 1886, as they sat on the porch watching Thomas chase fireflies while Rose dozed in Flora's arms, Zane turned to his wife. "Do you ever think about how we met, about everything that happened?" Flora considered the question. "Sometimes. Not as often as I used to. I used to be angry, not just at Edmund but at myself for being taken in by him. But now I see it differently. If he had not stolen from me, you would never have come looking for him. You would never have ridden to my ranch to return the money. We would never have met." "I have thought the same thing," Zane admitted. "I spent 4 months of my life tracking a criminal, angry and determined to see justice done. I told myself it was for Sarah, for all the women he hurt, and it was. But it also brought me to you. It brought me to this life. I would not change any of it." Flora leaned against his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him, the absolute rightness of his presence. "Neither would I. Edmund Fairweather took my money and my trust, but you gave me back so much more. You gave me partnership, love, a family. You gave me a future I could not have imagined. We gave each other a future, Zane corrected gently. He kissed the top of her head. And I plan to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret choosing me. As the years rolled on, the ranch continued to thrive. By 1890, they had expanded to nearly 80 acres, purchasing the adjacent property when it became available. Their cattle operation was well established, and Zane's horses were sought after throughout the Sacramento Valley. Thomas was now 7 years old, already showing an aptitude for working with animals that made his father proud. Rose was 5, bright and curious, following her mother around the garden and asking endless questions about everything she saw. In the fall of 1890, Flora gave birth to their third child, another son they named James. He was a calm baby, content to observe the world around him with serious dark eyes. The house was full of noise and life, exactly the opposite of the crushing loneliness Flora had felt before Zane came into her life. One afternoon, while the children were napping and Zane was in town buying supplies, Flora found herself in the barn, looking at the old trunk where she kept papers and mementos. Buried at the bottom was the bundle of letters from Edmund, the lies that had nearly destroyed her. She had kept them, though she was not entirely sure why. Perhaps as a reminder, perhaps as evidence of how far she had come. She pulled them out and read through them one more time, seeing with clear eyes the manipulation in every carefully chosen word. Edmund had been skilled at his deception, finding the exact weak points in her armor and exploiting them. But his letters, for all their false promises, felt thin and hollow compared to the real, solid life she had built with Zane. When Zane returned from town and found her in the barn with the letters spread around her, he knelt beside her with concern in his eyes. "What is this?" "The past," Flora said simply. "I was reading them and realizing that they do not hurt anymore. They do not mean anything except as a reminder of how I found you." Zane gathered the letters carefully. "What do you want to do with them?" Flora thought for a moment, then stood decisively. "Burn them. I do not need them anymore. I do not need the reminder or the warning. I know what real love looks like now, what real partnership means. These are just paper and lies." They built a small fire in the yard, feeding the letters one by one into the flames. As the last one curled and blackened, Flora felt a weight lift from her shoulders that she had not fully realized she was carrying. Zane wrapped his arms around her from behind, and they stood together watching the smoke rise into the clear California sky. "Thank you," Flora whispered. "For what?" "For tracking him down, for bringing back my money, for staying, for loving me, for giving me this life." She turned in his arms to face him, for being everything he pretended to be and so much more. Zane kissed her, deep and sweet, a kiss that held 8 years of love and partnership and shared dreams. "Thank you for taking a chance on me, for letting me prove that not all men are liars, for building this life with me." As 1891 dawned, the Dalton Ranch was a picture of prosperity and happiness. The children were growing, healthy, and loved. The business was stable and successful. Flora and Zane worked side by side every day, their partnership as strong as the day they married. They still took time in the evenings to sit on the porch and talk, maintaining the connection that had first drawn them together. Zane's family visited regularly, making the long journey from Colorado every year or two. Flora's neighbors had become friends, creating a community that supported each other through the inevitable challenges of ranch life. The isolation that had once threatened to consume Flora was a distant memory. In the summer of 1892, a letter arrived from Sacramento. It was from the district attorney's office, informing them that Edmund Crenshaw had completed his prison sentence and been released. The news gave Flora a moment of anxiety, old fears rising like ghosts. But Zane read the letter carefully and pointed out that Edmund had been released on the condition that he leave California and never return. He was being sent back east, to Pennsylvania, where he had family, under strict supervision. "He cannot hurt you anymore," Zane said firmly. "He cannot hurt anyone anymore. The law has done its job, and he is someone else's problem now." Flora nodded, realizing that she felt more pity than fear. Edmund had spent nearly 10 years in prison, paying for his crimes, but she had spent those same years building something beautiful and real. She had won in every way that mattered. That evening, as the family gathered for dinner, Flora looked around the table at her husband and children, at the life they had created together, and felt overwhelming gratitude. Thomas was telling a long, rambling story about a horse he had been working with. Rose was making faces at baby James, trying to make him laugh. Zane caught Flora's eye across the table and smiled, that warm, genuine smile that still made her heart skip after all these years. After the children were in bed, Flora and Zane walked out to the field where they had first gotten engaged under the harvest moon. The moon was full again, painting the valley in silver light. Zane pulled Flora close, and they swayed together in a slow dance with no music but the crickets and the rustle of wheat in the night breeze. "You remember the first time I came here?" Zane asked. "You were so guarded, so hurt. I was not sure you would even accept the money, let alone let me stay for dinner. I remember thinking you were too good to be true," Flora admitted, "that there had to be a catch, some reason why a stranger would ride so far just to help people he did not know. And now I know that you are exactly as good as you seemed. Better even. You have spent 10 years proving it to me every single day." Flora rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I love you, Zane Dalton, more than I knew it was possible to love someone." "I love you too, Flora, more than words can say." He tilted her chin up and kissed her, tender and passionate. "Thank you for letting me stay all those years ago. Thank you for giving me a chance to prove myself. Thank you for this life, this family, this love." They stood together under the moon, two people who had found each other through tragedy and transformed it into triumph. The ranch spread around them, a testament to their hard work and partnership. Inside the house, their children slept safely. In Colorado, Zane's family thought of them with love. In Sacramento, a criminal had paid his debt but lost everything, while his victims had rebuilt and thrived. The Wild West was changing, becoming more settled and civilized with each passing year. But here in the Sacramento Valley, on a ranch built by determination and sustained by love, Flora and Zane had created something timeless. They had taken the worst that life could offer and turned it into the best. They had found each other in the aftermath of betrayal and built a love that would last all their days. As they walked back to the house hand in hand, Flora thought about the frightened, lonely woman she had been 10 years ago, sending her life savings to a man who existed only on paper. That woman had been broken but not destroyed. She had survived, and in surviving, she had found something far more valuable than the money that was stolen. She had found partnership, family, and a love that was real and solid and true. The years continued to unfold in their gentle rhythm. By 1895, Thomas was 12 and already working the ranch like a man, though Zane was careful to make sure he still had time to be a child. Rose was 10, dividing her time between helping her mother in the garden and begging her father to teach her to ride like her brothers. James, now 5, was the quiet heart of the family, thoughtful and kind. In the spring of that year, Flora and Zane celebrated their 13th wedding anniversary. They took a rare trip to Sacramento, leaving the children with trusted neighbors, and spent 2 days simply being a couple rather than ranchers and parents. They visited a theater, ate at a nice restaurant, and stayed in a hotel that felt impossibly luxurious after years of ranch life. On their last evening, walking along the Sacramento River as the sun set, Zane pulled a small box from his pocket. "I wanted to give you this on our wedding day, but we chose your ring together instead. I have been carrying this for 13 years, waiting for the right moment." Inside the box was a delicate gold locket. When Flora opened it, she found a tiny photograph of herself from their wedding day on one side, and on the other, a piece of paper with words written in Zane's careful hand. "You saved me too." Flora's eyes filled with tears. "Zane, it is beautiful." "But what do you mean I saved you?" "I told you once that I spent 4 months tracking Edmund, determined to bring him to justice. What I did not tell you was that I was angry at the world, furious that such cruelty could exist and go unpunished. I was becoming hard, bitter. Then I met you, and you showed me that goodness still existed, that people could be hurt and still choose to hope again. You saved me from becoming consumed by anger. You gave me something to build toward instead of something to fight against." Flora threw her arms around him, heedless of the people walking past. "We saved each other, and we will keep saving each other every day for the rest of our lives." They returned to the ranch renewed, ready to continue the work they had started together. The years flowed on, bringing challenges and triumphs in equal measure. There were droughts that tested their resources and wet years that brought abundance. There were illnesses that scared them and recoveries that filled them with relief. Through it all, Flora and Zane remained partners, facing everything together. By 1898, as the century drew toward its close, the Dalton Ranch was one of the most respected operations in the Sacramento Valley. Thomas, now 15, had announced his intention to stay on the ranch and eventually take it over. Rose, 13, had developed a talent for training horses that rivaled her father's. James, 8, showed an interest in the business side of ranching, carefully noting prices and profits in a ledger Zane had given him. Flora stood on the porch one morning, watching her family work together in the yard. Zane was showing Thomas how to break a young horse to saddle. Rose was grooming the mares, talking to them in the gentle voice that seemed to calm even the most nervous animal. James sat on the fence, his ledger open on his knee, observing and recording everything. She thought about the woman she had been 16 years ago, alone and desperate enough to send all her money to a stranger. That woman had been so certain that her life was set on one path, that without a husband she would wither away into nothing. She had been wrong. She had not needed a husband to save her. She had needed a partner to work beside her, and she had found that in the most unexpected way. Edmund Fairweather had stolen her money and her trust, but in doing so, he had set in motion a chain of events that brought Zane Dalton to her door. The man who had taken everything from her had inadvertently given her more than she could have imagined. It was a strange sort of justice, one she had stopped trying to fully understand and simply accepted as the mysterious way life sometimes worked. Zane looked up from the horse and caught her watching. He smiled, that warm, genuine smile that still made her heart flutter after 16 years, and raised a hand in greeting. Flora waved back, feeling contentment settle over her like a warm blanket. This was her life, built from ashes and determination, sustained by love and hard work. It was everything she had ever wanted and more. As the new century dawned in 1900, bringing with it talk of progress and change, Flora and Zane faced the future with confidence. Their children were growing into capable, caring adults. Their ranch was thriving. Their love, tested by time and hardship, had only grown stronger. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the stars emerge, their children grown and gone to their own pursuits for the night, Zane took Flora's hand. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I had not come that day? If I had just sent the money with a letter instead of bringing it myself?" Flora considered the question seriously. "I suppose I would have rebuilt eventually. I am too stubborn to stay down for long, but it would have been a lonelier life, a harder one. I would have survived, but I would not have thrived the way I have with you." She squeezed his hand. "What made you decide to bring it in person?" "Honestly, I told myself it was the right thing to do, that you deserved to know the full story to have closure. But I think even then, before I met you, I was hoping for something more. Your letters, even though they were written to him, showed such strength and vulnerability. I wanted to meet the woman who could be both those things at once." Zane pulled her close. "Best decision I ever made." "Mine too," Flora whispered. "Taking a chance on you, letting you stay, opening my heart again. Best decision I ever made." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead. Two people who had found each other through the strangest of circumstances and built a love that would endure. The Wild West was fading into history, but what they had created together would last for generations. Their children would carry forward the lessons of hard work and partnership. Their grandchildren, when they came, would know the story of how their grandparents met, how a mail-order groom's betrayal had led to a love story that proved sometimes the worst moments in life could lead to the very best. Flora Edwards Dalton, who had once been so desperate for companionship that she sent her life savings to a stranger, had found something far more valuable than she ever imagined. She had found a true partner, a great love, and a life worth living. And it had all started with a cowboy who believed in justice and ended up finding his heart. The money Edmund Fairweather stole had been returned, every penny. But what Zane Dalton had given Flora was worth far more than gold. He had given her trust restored, hope renewed, and a love that would last all their days and beyond.